In the last lecture, we saw how Jesus fulfilled and superseded and replaced the entire Old Testament law. Now, the heart of, and we previously saw, of course, how he replaced the entire sacrificial system and the priesthood and all of that. Now, the heart, of course, of Old Testament worship and of the law was the Sabbath. But even the Sabbath was a type or a shadow that was pointing forward and finds its fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Now, in Colossians chapter 2, verses 13 through 15, Paul argues that Christ canceled our debt of sin on the cross and made us alive together with him. But then in Colossians 2, verses 16 and 17, he concludes, "Therefore, no one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath day, things which are a mere shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ." Now, Jesus asserted and demonstrated his authority over the Sabbath. He said, "I am the Lord of the Sabbath." Now, the Pharisees had claimed that Jesus' disciples were guilty of breaking the Sabbath when they picked heads of grain on the Sabbath and ate them. But Jesus' answer was that the disciples are innocent because the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. And of course, that means as the Lord of the Sabbath, he has the authority to abrogate or change even the Sabbath, because only the Lord can do that. Now, therefore, he made a similar claim to have equality with God, because again, only God can change his own law. But in John 5, Jesus healed a man on the Sabbath and then told him, "Pick up your pallet and walk," which was in violation of the Sabbath regulations. Again, Jesus claimed to be the Lord of the Sabbath. And so this tells us, both of these incidents, that his being the Lord of the Sabbath relates not only to his own conduct in healing, for example, but also affects the conduct of others. So his disciples could pick the heads of grain and eat them. The man could pick up his pallet and walk home, even though those things had been prohibited on the Sabbath. So his claim to be the Lord of the Sabbath not only is a messianic claim of tremendous proportions, because who else could change the Sabbath? That's why the Pharisees and the scribes were so angry with him, because he did these things on the Sabbath. Well, only the Messiah, who is divine, could do these things. But his doing this raises the possibility of a future change or reinterpretation of the Sabbath. Now, we see this in a number of places, particularly in Hebrews 3 and 4, because in the fourth commandment clearly specifies the seventh day. It's not a 1 in 7 principle. Honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. Now, the Sabbath was uniquely associated with Israel, and it was according to Exodus 31. It was the sign of the Old Covenant. But we need to understand that the fourth commandment regarding keeping the Sabbath was based on two rationales. First, in Exodus 20, one of the rationales, Exodus 20, verse 11, is, that's Numbers. We will go back to Exodus. In Exodus 20, the first rationale for the Sabbath was because God had ceased his creation on the seventh day. But it says, Exodus 20, verses 9 and 10, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. For in it you shall not do any work, you or your son or daughter, your male or your female servant, or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the seventh day and made it holy. But you may not realize there is another rationale for the Sabbath, which is found in Deuteronomy 5, verse 15. Because in Deuteronomy, the Ten Commandments are again restated, and it says, beginning at Deuteronomy 5, verse 13, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall not do any work, you, your sons, daughters, servants, and so on. Verse 15. Why? You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Now, it might seem strange. How could the Exodus point to the Sabbath? Well, it is found in what the meaning for the Sabbath was. And Deuteronomy 12, verses 9 and 10, make this clear. And it was to find rest from your enemies. Deuteronomy 12 says this, you have not yet come to the resting place and the inheritance which the Lord your God is giving you. When you cross the Jordan and live in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies around you so that you are in security, then it shall come about that the place which the Lord your God will choose for his name to dwell, there you shall bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, and so on and so forth. So, and there are other passages in the Old Testament which point out that the whole point of the Sabbath, it was a sign pointing to the rest that the nation would receive when it was free from slavery and free from its enemies in the land. Now, Jesus, in Jesus' actions show again that he's the Lord of the Sabbath, and that we find our real fulfillment. I mean, in terms of work, of course, Jesus completed the work for us. We don't have to work for our salvation. He did it all. So he fulfilled the first rationale for the Sabbath, namely, we no longer have to work. He did it all. But he also gives us the rest that the Sabbath was pointing to. And Hebrews 3 and 4 talk about this and discuss the importance of Christ with respect to the Sabbath. And because in Hebrews 3 and 4, what it is arguing, basically from Hebrews 3 verse 7 through Hebrews 4 verse 11, it is revealing that the Sabbath day was merely a type or a shadow of our new covenant salvation. In other words, our salvation in Christ is our Sabbath rest. Now, although the consummation of our rest remains in the future, Hebrews 4 points out that those who believe in Christ enter that rest and have entered the rest. And it says that we have come to Mount Zion and the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, as it says in Hebrews 12. But so let me just take a look briefly with you at Hebrews 3 and 4, because this is showing that Christ is the fulfillment of the Sabbath. Hebrews 3 verse 7 begins by saying, just as the Holy Spirit says, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as when they provoked me in the day of trial in the wilderness, where your fathers tried and tested me. Therefore I was angry with them And verse 11, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. So verse 12, take care, brethren, that there not be any one of you who is evil, unbelieving in heart, that falls away from the living God. And he goes on to say in verse 15, today if you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts as when they provoked me. And so, it was with them who he was angry with for 40 years. Was it not with those who sinned, whose bodies fell in the wilderness, and to whom he swore that they would not enter his rest? Those were the disobedient. So we see that they were not able to enter because of unbelief. Chapter 4. Therefore, let us fear, if while a promise remains of entering his rest, any one of you may seem to have come short of it. For indeed, we have had good news preached to us, just as they also. But the word they heard did not profit them, because it was not united by faith in those who heard. Chapter 4, verse 3. For we who have believed enter that rest. And then he goes on, he says, just as he said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although his works were finished from the foundation of the world. And then he goes on to say, verse 6, therefore, since it remains for some to enter it, and those who formerly had good news preached to them failed to enter because of disobedience, he again fixes a certain day, today, saying through David, after so long a time, just as been said before, today if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, he would not have spoken of another day after that. So there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For the one who has entered his rest has himself also rested from his works, as God did from his. Therefore let us be diligent to enter that rest, so that no one will fail through following the same example of disobedience. So this passage in Hebrews 3 and 4 is talking about both rationales behind the Sabbath. And it is saying that although Israel entered the land, they never achieved the rest that was promised to them, of which the Sabbath was a foreshadow. Rather, they were oppressed, they sinned, they had enemies. Ultimately, the nation was divided and went into exile, and even when they came back from exile, they were under the domination of other nations. They never had the rest from their enemies that was indicated. Furthermore, in chapter 4, verse 10, it says, the one who has entered his rest has himself also rested from his works, as God did from his. So that talks about the work requirement. So the point of this is saying that it is only in Christ that we enter that Sabbath rest, because Christ has done all the work for us. There's nothing we need to do. Our rest from work is perpetual because he did it all. And that our rest in Christ is also perpetual. So look at it. We talked at some length about Galatians 3 and 4, but the argument here in Hebrews 3 and 4 is actually quite similar to Paul's argument in Galatians 3 and 4. In Galatians, Paul argued that Abraham was justified by faith, not by the law. And the promised blessings to Abraham accrue only to those who believe in Jesus Christ. He also pointed out that the law was temporary until the coming of Christ. Likewise, here in Hebrews, the argument is that it was because of unbelief that Old Testament Israel never entered the rest that God had promised them. Now, although Israel ultimately entered the promised land, it never found the rest and the peace, but continued to experience war, oppression, and exile. However, Christ has defeated our only permanent enemies: sin, Satan, and death. Therefore, by faith, we have entered his rest, according to Hebrews 4, verses 3 and 10. In the Old Testament, refraining from work 1 day per week, in other words, keeping the Sabbath, reflected the temporary and partial nature of Israel's rest from her enemies. However, in the New Covenant, because Christ has done all the work needed to secure our permanent salvation, our rest is permanent. And consequently, the early church father Justin Martyr recognized that Christianity does not require keeping one particular Sabbath day. Instead, he said, we are living in a perpetual Sabbath. So the Sabbath day was a type which finds its true fulfillment in the permanence of our Sabbath rest in Christ, our perpetual Sabbath, as Justin Martyr said. And that perpetual Sabbath, interestingly enough, is even hinted at in the first mention of God's resting on the seventh day. Because you'll recall in Genesis, in days 1 through 6, the days of creation, it gets to the end and says, and there was evening and morning the first day, evening and morning the second day, evening and morning the third, etc., through day 6. But it's only the seventh day where it says that God rested from his labors. It does not show evening and morning the seventh day. In other words, it is a little hint that what is being gotten at here is something special, something unending. That's hinting forward in very veiled form, kind of like the first announcement of the gospel in Genesis 3, verse 15. It doesn't name Jesus by name, it doesn't talk about the cross and so on. It's using veiled language, but it is hinting at something great which Jesus accomplished on the cross. So there's this little hint, even in Genesis 2 and 3, of the unending nature of our true Sabbath rest, because it doesn't have the formulaic words, there was the evening and morning, the seventh day. And so again, the Sabbath was always pointing forward to the much deeper and permanent rest that we find in salvation, which we appropriate by faith. Now, I would also point out that the fact that the new covenant supersedes the old covenant, it renders Sabbath keeping no longer binding on us, because the Sabbath was a sign of the old covenant with the nation of Israel, as Exodus 31 points out that the sons of Israel shall, 31 verse 16, the sons of Israel shall observe the Sabbath to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generation as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. Now, so that was a sign with Israel. But again, we have seen, so it was part of the old covenant. But now the old covenant has been superseded by the new covenant. And consequently, under the new covenant, the Sabbath and all the other Jewish feasts and festivals and so on are no longer binding, which is why Paul said in Colossians 2, no one is to act as your judge with respect to a Sabbath day, which was a mere shadow of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Now, the fulfillment of the Sabbath in Christ means that Sunday is not simply a Christian Sabbath day, equivalent to the Saturday of the Jews. Christians early on recognized the significance of the end of the Old Covenant, which means the end of Sabbath worship. And they transformed their understanding of Sabbath by no longer refraining from work on the seventh day. Remember, the issue in the Jerusalem Council of Acts 15 was whether it was necessary to circumcise new Gentile believers and direct them to observe the law of Moses. The answer was a resounding no. And so a Sabbath day or an alternative Sabbath day is not required of Gentile believers. Early on, the church began gathering for worship on Sundays in honor of the resurrection. And this was confirmed, again, by the early church father Ignatius of Antioch, who said, "Let every friend of Christ keep the Lord's Day as a festival, the resurrection day, the queen and chief of all the days." And Justin Martyr similarly said, "We hold this common gathering on Sunday, since it is the first day on which God's transformed darkness and matter made the universe, and Jesus Christ, our Savior, rose from the dead on that day." Now, there's no evidence from the second century that there was any controversy as to whether Christians should worship on Sunday or not. There is no record of any Christian group among the early Christians that did not worship on Sunday. And so it was universal. And by the way, I know that Seventh-day Adventists talk about the Sabbath day and the Sabbath regulations are binding on us. Again, as I see it, they do not have a proper understanding of biblical theology. They need to read Hebrews 3 and 4. They don't have a proper understanding of typology, of types and shadows, to find that even the Sabbath, as Paul said in Colossians 2, was a shadow. It is not the substance. The substance is Christ, and Christ has fulfilled that. And by the way, I would point out Walter Martin has a very good book called The Kingdom of the Cults. And in that book, he provides detailed biblical and historical refutation of the claims by Seventh-day Adventists that the seventh-day Sabbath worship is still required by Christians. Now, Christians are not commanded to worship on Sundays. We are free to worship on any day of the week. But our worship on Sunday underscores the different basis of Christian worship and worship on the Jewish Sabbath. It is Christ's resurrection that fulfills the rest signified by the Old Testament Sabbath. And so the link between the first day of the week, Sunday, and the Old Testament Sabbath is not in terms of a day of physical rest, but in terms of the celebration of the true Sabbath rest of salvation that Christ has brought about. And so worshiping on Sunday points up the fact that Christians early on realized the seventh day, Saturday, Sabbath, was a type, was a shadow, but that Christ's resurrection pointed out the fact on the first day that the whole of the law, the whole of the Sabbath has been fulfilled now. And I think it's significant that by rising on Sunday, that's the first day of the week, that even is a pointer that we are now in a new era. A new time has begun. A new week has begun, so to say. And so there is the New Testament writer's perspective on the Sabbath rest points up the fact that there is no warrant for applying the physical rest requirements of the Old Testament to the New Testament Lord's Day. So in other words, if you have to work on Sunday, you can do so. Our Sabbath is perpetual. It's like the Old Testament Sabbath was 1 day per week. And again, it was set apart to point forward as a type or a shadow to the rest that we will have. But in the New Testament, it's like every day is a Sabbath. And again, I'm going to conclude here by mentioning something that was hinted at earlier, when I pointed out that even in Genesis 2, it was hinting of a perpetual Sabbath, because it didn't say an evening and morning was the seventh day. Now, we still are physical. We still have evenings and mornings. We have to work. We have all of these things. So our Sabbath rest, we have it. It's permanent because we have Christ. But we will find the consummation of this Sabbath rest in the new heavens and in the new Jerusalem, on the new earth. And that is indicated, again, in Revelation 21, where it says, regarding the new Jerusalem, the city has no need of the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of God has illumined it, and its lamp is the Lamb. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. In the daytime, for there will be no night there, its gates will never be closed. So what's that saying is, in the new Jerusalem, the new earth, it's not going to have the sun. There's going to be no night. It's going to be no more evening and morning was this day or that day. It is kind of the fulfillment of what was hinted at in Genesis 2, verses 2 and 3, which did not mention evening and morning was the seventh day. So we will find the complete, full Sabbath rest, where there is no more sorrow, there is no more lack of peace, there is no more warfare, and so on and so forth. We have that now spiritually. Our Sabbath rest is permanent now, but we still face all of these troubles. There's a lack of peace, but the Sabbath rest will find its complete and full consummation in the new Jerusalem, the new heaven and the new earth. And so Revelation makes clear what Genesis 2 was hinting at all along. The Sabbath day was always hinting at Christ and the true rest from our work and from our enemies that he brings, and will find its consummation in the new earth. Even though it is present now, we don't have to work. We have no enemies, not Satan, not anyone, that can tear us from the peace that we have in Christ. Final consummation is yet to come.